Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar in partnership with GEM, Great Hiring in 2020, Best Practices for Recruiters and Hiring Managers. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Lauren Badamy, and I'm Greenhouse's Director of Digital Marketing. I'll be facilitating things behind the scenes here today, along with a couple of my colleagues, Marnie and Allie, who are facilitating our Q&A. And I'm looking forward to passing things over to our expert panel here in just a few minutes to dig into the discussion. First, though, I'd like to address something that I imagine we're all thinking about. The world of work has certainly experienced a major shift in the last few weeks. And among all of the uncertainty, more people are working from home now than ever before. As you can see, if you look across our panel today, I think Ken has logged in from his garage, it looks like. So we're really appreciative of that and all of the sacrifices and arrangements people are making to keep going. The impact that this has on hiring processes and hiring strategy is changing and will continue to change, and that affects hiring managers and recruiting teams in a big way. So I think you'll agree that with so much separation between our teams physically, best practices on how to communicate clearly with each other while using empathy for the challenges that arise within our roles is paramount. We hope that the discussion today will help team members, whether in recruiting or in management, improve employee relationships, increase team efficiency, and continue to nurture top talent in your organizations effectively. I'm going to mention this a lot throughout, but we will have a Q&A period at the end. We've already gotten some of your questions from the registration process queued up. But if others come in, please shoot those our way. Before we get started, I'll go over a couple of housekeeping tips to make sure you have the best viewing experience possible. Your On24 console, depending on your screen size, you might need to scroll or zoom in or zoom out to see everything. There's a lot of different ways to engage with us, and the picture here shows you all the widgets you have available, from the slide deck to the media player, the Q&A widget, additional resources, and more. If you need to move things around, expand the view, feel free to do so, whatever works best for you. A couple of technical tips. Please ensure that JavaScript and cookies are enabled. If you're having any video lag issues, it's probably the reason why. You can connect to audio via computer, but there's no phone line today. And all lines will be muted. But if you do have questions for either myself or the speakers, please type those into the Q&A widget within your console, and we'll do our best to get back to you. And lastly, everyone's favorite question, today's webinar is being recorded. We will send out the resources, the recording, and the deck within the next day or so. Today's agenda is super simple. So in a minute here, I'm going to pass things over to our speakers to introduce themselves before they dive into our fireside chat. And then we're saving some time at the end for audience questions. So please make sure to send them as they arise. And with that, I'll hand things over to Alexis.
Hi, thanks, Lauren. I am Alexis. I'm a technical recruiter at Greenhouse Software. I've been here for almost 3 years. I started out as a recruiting coordinator, and I'm super excited to chat with both Can and Yuri about this topic, and I will let them introduce themselves. Can, do you want to kick it off?
Thanks, Alexis. My name is Can. I'm dialing in from my shed, my work-from-home office. I'm currently head of engineering at a company called HipCamp. My career has been largely in consumer internet. Been in the Valley for a while, and I graduated from University of Michigan. Go Blue.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yuri. I am originally from the Netherlands, where I also started my technical recruiting career about 2 years ago. Today, I'm a technical recruiter with Sonder, and I'm super excited to be here today to talk recruiting with you guys. And I also think it's really cool because I get to partner with Can again, even though we don't work together anymore.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you both. Great. So to kick off the questions, I'd love to just hear a little bit about some universal pain points. So when it comes to recruiting from both a hiring manager and recruiting team perspective, what are those pain points that you both have kind of discovered? Can, do you want to kick us off again?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. there's tons of problems, obviously. I think the ones that really come to mind that I've seen is like just, it's a really tough hiring market, at least for engineering in the Valley. I know things are changing, but like just getting candidates, when they're looking, and just being a good match, and then getting them through the process, and then competing with all the other great companies. It's always a challenge, and I think this is where partnering closely with hiring manager and a recruiter partnering closely and understanding how we actually get that talent is critical. Understanding comp, understanding what they're looking for, understanding maybe the skill sets that'll be a good match. It's always, you got to get those things right, or you won't be able to close candidates or get them through the door. That's like the number one problem I've seen.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Another point that I often see as a challenge for both the recruiter and the hiring manager is really nailing the candidate profiles in an efficient manner. What I've experienced when starting a new role is that obviously as a recruiter, you're going to have to line on the role and really learn about it. But what I also see often is that hiring managers maybe don't know 100% what they're looking for in the beginning. And that person that you end up hiring may be a little bit different than the one you were initially looking for. So because of this, when starting on a role, definitely always start your search wide and ask the hiring manager for tons of feedback, as this will challenge both the hiring manager as yourself to really think deeper about the role, and also really identify the things that you are not looking for, right? Process of elimination to, help you align really quickly on that role.
For sure. That's definitely something I can relate to as well. We do like kickoff meetings in the beginning of a process, and I find weekly syncs or weekly email updates super helpful with the hiring managers to make sure we're kind of staying aligned throughout the entire process. Can definitely relate to that. Cool. So next question, who should be responsible for owning the hiring process and why? Yuri, do you want to start this one off?
Yeah, sure. So I think to hire successfully and efficiently, recruiting and hiring managers need to partner very closely. They must both take ownership, right? If you have a hiring manager that is involved and invested in the process, it makes everything easier, from calibration to interviewing to closing. That said, I think in the end, recruiting does own hitting headcount. And I think it's very important as a recruiter to remember that, to really take ownership of the process.
Yeah, and so, I might chime in here as well. So I think Yuri is absolutely right. At the end of the day, hiring is a recruiting, say, like KPI or OKR, right? But what I found working with Yuri and other recruiters is that if you can work very closely and actually create accountability on both sides, that's really what success will, that's what actually is going to cause success. I think as much as a recruiter can define processes and kind of like create these sessions and stuff like that, if the engineering team or the hiring team isn't also deeply integrated, I think you'll have a suboptimal experience, whether it's the interviewing, the giving the feedback on the profiles, even closing, recruiting, it'll benefit them greatly to pull in that team and really get them involved in the process.
For sure. Something that we've kind of seen as really successful on our end is having like joint responsibilities between the hiring manager and recruiter. So we do different like dinners to engage with, the larger technical engineering network. We've done like joint sourcing with our hiring managers, whether it's kind of sending them lists and helping them come up with messaging or even sending on behalf of them with GEM. I'm not sure if you guys had any kind of like joint responsibilities that you two split off even when you were working together. But that's something that we've kind of seen successful at Greenhouse. Yeah,
we've done a fair number of sourcing parties, beer, pizza, and sourcing. We've put together a number of spreadsheets. Sobo, like you mentioned, is a super powerful tool. It certainly helps scale, whoever sends a message and gets the best conversion, it helps you scale that. And so like there's just, getting that team involved is going to be really, really, really high leverage.
Absolutely. Awesome. Cool. So the next question. So the hiring process itself is a really big factor for successful hiring. So what are the necessary first steps for both recruiters and hiring managers to make sure that they're set up for success? Ken, do you want to start this one off?
I think probably from a top level, you need to nail your headcount goal. And, once you have that number, if you don't know what it is, you can't build a process around it. So you gotta come together and be like, I need to hire, I don't know, let's say 100 engineers in this year. And that's split across, full stack, let's say 10% full stack, 20% mobile, and so on and so forth. So once you establish your goals, from there, you can actually craft that process around it. Yuri can tell you more, but I would just say, like, for me, it's really about getting that number and understanding the capacity that my team has to provide in terms of interviewing, in terms of, defining things. There's a lot that engineering would have to do, for example. But Yuri can tell you more about the process.
Yeah, definitely. So agree with Ken to have clear targets and clear numbers. And, to me, the most important first step is all about setting very clear expectations with each other, right? And really establishing a partnership with the hiring manager, because in the end of the day, you're going to be working together for a long time. So what can you expect me as a recruiter, and what do I need from you as a hiring manager? What will our roles be? What will our feedback loop look like? Every hiring manager is also different, and they may have different styles of working. So what I like to do is try and adapt and come up with small process tweaks to just make the experience for both of us more pleasant. For me, this has made collaborating a lot smoother and resulted in more efficient process. And besides clear expectations on the process itself and the way of working together, I think it's very important to also just set very, very clear expectations on what the job market for this specific role looks like. Right? As a recruiter, do some job market research before an initial intake meeting with a hiring manager, engage how hard it is to find a specific profile, and then to share these market insights with the hiring manager so that they also have an idea of what it looks like and what we recruiters are working with. Also to prevent, the idea that, we can just source infinitely and, pull out all these profiles. Definitely opens up more visibility to the hiring manager. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I think the expectation setting is key. I know at Greenhouse, we actually run like hiring manager training. So all of our hiring managers, before even working on their first role, they go through a training with one of the recruiters, really just get a good understanding of what it is like to be a hiring manager at Greenhouse, and also just like set expectations for the overall process. But yeah, I love that sourcing point as well to make sure that, giving the hiring manager a good understanding of what the market looks like, and know that we just can't do in sourcing indefinitely. Cool. Ken, did you have anything else you wanted to add there before we move on to the next question?
I really liked what Yuri was saying about setting expectations. And I think depending on your org size, for example, when I partnered with Yuri, I had several managers underneath me. And so even if me and Yuri were aligned, there's like another level of setting expectations within my team, making sure that my, hiring managers are also, meeting those expectations. And like Yuri said, every hiring manager is different. Some have done this before. Some are first-time managers. Really understanding what does it take to make those hires is important. To understand the hours that you have to put in for sourcing parties, referrals, interviews, like really, really getting aligned with those expectations is important so that it doesn't surprise anybody.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. Cool. So moving on to the next question. In both of your experiences, how has a more structured approach to hiring impacted your companies? And with that, what specifically does structured hiring kind of allow recruiters and hiring managers to do better? Yuri, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, definitely. So I think when a structured approach is done right, it helps hiring. It helps with hiring for continuous roles, right? So it allows you to really scale the process and make a lot of hires. A structured approach will also help make the hiring process more objective, right, with a standardized process, which leads to consistency and also reduces the chances of wrong hiring decision, being it turning down a qualified candidate or making an offer to someone that may not fit the profile. But I believe Ken also has some interesting stories, what you can do if you go outside of the structured hiring process.
So, well, first let me talk about structure and then like going outside, because I think you kind of balance both. So like, the value of having structure and process is just giving you visibility, and what that affords you is the ability to adapt, right? Like, for example, hiring in January is very different than hiring in July. But like having structure around your process allows you to understand how things are changing. If a company is hiring like mad and then all of a sudden starts ratcheting down, it allows you to adjust your pipeline to keep people warm while you're kind of like pulled back. But then once things heat up again, you can like get that pipeline going again. And so like the ability to move fast is empowered through having a clear process. There's nothing worse than just starting and you're like, okay, now I have to hire 10 and you have no pipeline, you have nothing in place. But if you have something there, you can just like, ratchet up, ratchet down and actually get this machine going. And then like you already said, like you can't be at the mercy of the process. So process is great until it doesn't work anymore. And so there's times where you really have to like kind of break the rules. There'll be some set of candidates who just fall outside of the profile, but they're like, they got that X factor and you got to get them, right? So you have to get creative. One example is there were times when we went straight to offer, no interview, nothing. And it's kind of crazy. I think if you talk to most recruiters, they're like, no way, that's not going to happen. But like, I think you have to know how to break the rules and understand the risk that you take. And, in those particular cases, we did that because we had a wealth of actually reference data to understand whether or not this person was going to be a good fit and predict if they'll be successful. So you always have to find a justification to break those rules. But being able to do that allows you to actually have a leg up from others, right? And this can apply everywhere, whether it's the process, the offer itself, getting creative. Just a data point, when I negotiated for my role at Sonder, I proposed 0 salary and, 5x the equity, and I broke the rules. And so like be creative, right?
Awesome. Yeah. And kind of, I love that story, and kind of circling back to the structured piece in case it's kind of helpful. I know that like in this really weird time of hiring that a lot of us are in right now, we found that, our structure that we had in place and our process we've had in place has been really helpful when moving everything to be 100% remote for all of our interviewing and hiring. And it's kind of brought back almost like a sense of normalcy in this like very odd and unknown time. So yeah, I don't know if either of you have kind of had that experience while doing all these virtual interviews and whatnot, but it's something that we found really helpful right now. So the next question is, many recruiting teams struggle with getting the right data from their recruiting technology and then kind of knowing what to do with it. So when it comes to data, what are some metrics that you two recommend exploring? And with that, what have kind of provided the most insight and been most helpful from both recruiting and hiring standpoints? Ken, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah. So because I'm an engineer, I think of things like systems. So when I think of recruiting, to me, it's just a funnel, just like a product funnel. And at the end of that funnel is somebody who starts at your company, right? And so for me, it's all about hitting that hiring number and then constructing what that funnel looks like so that at every single stage, I understand how many people are going through it, from the reach out to the initial call, to the phone screen, to the interview, to the accept, to like the start. And so knowing the volume across that pipeline as well as the conversion across each step. And if I have that and I know my hiring target, let's say 100 engineers in a year, I can actually budget, how many hours I need to set aside for engineers to interview, right? And how many interviews I have to do. And that's very powerful. And as your company adapts, as your hiring goes up or down, you can actually start planning with engineers because, interviewing takes time. Either they can code or they can interview, and understanding those capacity needs is very important. So for me, it's all about the funnel. But obviously, outside of that, it's also important to build a strong tech brand. So I think, knowing what the candidate experience is like is critical. So if you deliver some sort of candidate survey and have some sort of NPS, that's really, really valuable because there's nothing worse than getting that angry interviewer who didn't get the role, and then it kind of just turns into like a Glassdoor review and then actually destroys your funnel. So you really want to make sure people have the best experience.
Yeah, definitely agree with Ken here that the hiring funnel is central to the data that I look at as a recruiter as well. both to forecast and do capacity planning. What's also really useful with looking at the recruiting funnel is identifying things that you can do better in the process, things to optimize, right? If you notice that your conversion from TPS to on-site is really, really bad, you can ask yourself, why is that? Are the people that just make it to TPS not the right profile, or is the people or the person that's conducting the TPS not aligned on the role? And that will also really help you as a recruiter to just pinpoint problems in the process that are not working very well right now. Other useful metrics that we have looked at in the past is, I believe you can pull a report in Greenhouse where you can see interviewer calibration, right? So all of the interviewers that you use throughout a role, you'll be able to see how often of the times they're right about a hire and how often of the times they're wrong about a hire. So based off of this, you can A, put together stronger interview panels, and B, train the interviewers, give them interviewer training to the ones that maybe not as aligned as the other ones.
Definitely, yeah. We do interviewing training here at Greenhouse as well, and I've definitely looked at that report too for especially the technical interviews to kind of make sure that people are aligned on what is passing this technical interview look like, and make sure everyone's kind of aligned on that. But yeah, kind of going back to Can's point on candidate survey results, I found that super helpful. We look at like candidate satisfaction, and that way we kind of have feedback to look back on and improve the process throughout. So that's one of the ones that I find super important as well. Great. So moving on to recruiting technology. So would love to hear from both of you how the use of recruiting technology has affected the hiring process from both like a recruiting standpoint and a hiring manager standpoint. So Yuri, would you like to kick this one off?
Yes, definitely. So I've only been recruiting for about 2 years now, but in that short period of time, I've definitely seen a huge improvement in the recruiting technology that's available to us today. So, for example, when I was working with Ken, we were setting up a brand new team in the city, in a new market that neither of us were familiar with. And so in order to get a grasp of the market, every candidate that I would source or find, I would put in a spreadsheet, I would add their company in, I would put in a crunch link base to that company in order to make the process easy for us to both see like, hey, how likely would these people be a fit for what we're looking for or not. Back then, GEM, for example, did not have the profile review tool. If I would have had it back then, it would have been as easy as just creating a project, putting people in there and requesting a review from Ken. So it's just like small things like that that technology allows us to save a lot of time on and really spend your time on just optimizing the candidate journey and finding good profiles.
So for me, I think there's been a lot of really awesome technology, like products out there that really changed for recruiting. My favorite is the whole campaign thing, where basically, one, you could do a lot of SOBOs. You could send out a ton of reach outs, as the VP of Bench or whoever. But also the technology allows you to have a trickle of follow-ups scheduled and everything with templates and everything. I think that's been just a game changer, because one, it creates a better, candidate experience because you feel like there's a continual conversation. It adds a lot of automation so that, one sourcer can almost act like 10, but also it really reaches, it increases the fan out that you can have as a recruiting org. So that's just one of the things, but that alone is just a massive game changer. And I think there's new technology every day. I mean, there's some bots out there that will send email as me too, and I don't do no work. But there's just incredible innovation right now in recruiting.
Yeah, I found GEM to be super helpful, especially when collaborating with hiring managers, whether, I think I mentioned before, either it's me sending them a list of people and them doing their own outreach through GEM, or, them actually just getting on there and doing it themselves. Or one of you mentioned, this send as feature has been super helpful in making sure I'm just kind of getting approval from my hiring manager that all of these people are good, kind of that review function that you already mentioned. And then kind of sending on behalf of them has been a huge time saver and just really help the candidate journey. And also I think kind of helps personalize things as well. Awesome. So our last question for both of you from the fireside chat portion, if you had to summarize key takeaways for recruiters, what would they be and why for Yuri?
Yeah, so I think my main takeaway is that when starting a new role, I really believe that a good start is half the work. So again, really establishing that partnership with the hiring manager from the beginning and setting very clear expectations on who's doing what and clear expectations on what to expect funnel-wise, I really think is key to really working well with the hiring manager, which in turn will also really make sure that you're going to hire for the role quickly and efficiently. And another key takeaway is just what we talked about, technology rise. There's so much great recruiting technology out there, and definitely take the time to explore it, to figure out how it works and use it to the best of your advantage.
Yeah.
Awesome. For Ken, how about for hiring managers?
So I would say, the single thing that I would emphasize for every hiring manager, also recruiting, is that recruiting is everybody's job, right? So I know in the beginning we said that ultimately recruiting owns this, but if you can get your whole team, engineering or the hiring team and recruiting to really believe that recruiting is also their job, it's just going to be so much better. You'll have people a lot more leaned in, doing referrals, sourcing on their own, making the interview experience better, making lunch fun, having happy hours. If everybody's vested in that, you're going to get better candidates. For the ones who you turn away, they'll also be happy because they had such a great experience. You have investments, engineering might build a web page for you or something like that. So get everybody involved, create high ownership on recruiting. You can get so much, good results out of that.
Definitely. Great. Well, thank you both so much. At this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Lauren, and she'll be facilitating Q&A.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you to all three of you for that insightful conversation. And there's going to be a lot more of it. We've been getting a lot of questions from the audience that we're kind of excited to dig into here in just a few minutes. Before we get to audience Q&A, wanted to leave you with a few ways to learn more. We have a few additional resources that you can check out in the left column of your console. There's links to download additional resources. In particular, we recommend checking out a new ebook that we actually just published today, Distributed Hiring and Remote Working, The Essential Guide. We hope it'll help you navigate hiring and working in a distributed world. It also includes tips that recruiters and hiring managers can put into practice right away, from video interviewing, how to handle interactive interviews when you're not in the office. And our partners at GEM have shared their recent blog post, 3 Ways Recruitment Tech Helps Recruiter and Hiring Manager Relationships. This blog post discusses the ways in which recruiting technology enables hiring managers and recruiters, whether in person or remote. If you have any questions for us at Greenhouse, you can always email us at ask-marketing@greenhouse.io, and we'll be sure to route the question to the right person. Lastly, before we get into our questions, we wanted to give you a way to request more information about GEM, Greenhouse, or both. Please take a minute here. Let us know if you'd like to request a demo from either company. For those of you who may not know, Greenhouse is the hiring software. More than an ATS, we create the right technology, know-how, and support that businesses need to be great at hiring. GEM, an integrated partner of Greenhouse, is an all-in-one recruiting platform that integrates with LinkedIn, your email, and your ATS. GEM enables world-class recruiting teams to find, engage, and nurture top talent. Once you can follow up accordingly. Okay, so with that, let us get into our audience Q&A. Thank you again, Marnie and Ali, for helping to facilitate this here for everybody, but we'll start off with Yuri. What are some hiring trends you're seeing as a result of the changing work environment? I think this is one on top of everybody's mind here.
Yeah, so definitely the big one out there is that everything is being done remote. right? So interviews through Zoom, trying to get a candidate experience through Zoom. We're also really in the early stages, so it's quite early to tell what like the big trends out there. So I can't tell you that either. We're just rolling with the changes and trying to make the best of it.
Yeah, I don't know, Alexis, do you have anything from the greenhouse side, what you're all seeing?
Yeah, I agree there. It's definitely kind of hard to kind of see what the future holds at this point. But I think, like I mentioned before, really sticking to our structured process has been helpful when, moving everything to remote, because I think that's kind of been the big and most obvious thing at the moment. I'm just kind of hoping sticking with our structure and the processes that have been in place before this happened will hopefully kind of help us navigate whatever the future holds. But yeah, I think it is a bit early to kind of tell, and just kind of holding on to that little sense of normalcy will hopefully be really helpful.
Awesome. This is another question for everybody. What are some strategies for making the remote onboarding experience feel more like in person? Alexis, Yuri, does one of you want to kick that off? So I guess onboarding during this strange time.
Yeah, so what we started doing, of course, is just like for example, the laptop, we ship it to the candidate. We do have an HR team that's in charge of this and to really make a great onboarding experience. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing right now, but I definitely know they're thinking about it. One thing that we are doing during interviews is we have a lot of great pictures of our product, our Saunders. So whenever we're talking to somebody that we might be onboarding or that we might be interviewing, we use Zoom to put the background of a Sonder unit. And then, everybody they talk to has like a different Sonder background, and so they can get a real feel of what the product looks like. So that's maybe a small example of how we're using Zoom and the backgrounds to be a bit creative there.
Yeah, it was really cool. Alexis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, no worries. I think, the shipping the laptops, working closely with employee experience and people operations, because they're definitely kind of owning that process. And I think just being really transparent and open with the candidate about what onboarding will look like and, how things are kind of in the works and we're figuring it out as we go along is something that we've all kind of been doing as well. And I think the transparency piece is definitely appreciated from the candidates because I think we're all kind of navigating this together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, a question for you, Ken. How can recruiters and hiring managers align company hiring strategies as the world of work is changing?
Great question. So first of all, let's just acknowledge that. Yeah, let's just acknowledge that this is like unprecedented. So nobody has the right answer, but my feeling is that, one, you need to really figure out what your strategy is before you can align. And I think what I've seen in various places is that, right now people might be more conservative. So there's maybe a pause or maybe they're more selective, due to like the influx of supply. And so that's one example. And so that will in turn affect maybe your headcount targets or lack of. And so really, going back to like, what is the hiring plan based on the company strategy? And then, working through that to see how it impacts the teams, whether you're, ratcheting down the, hiring capacity or you're actually building up pipeline, knowing that in 6 months, things will be like, great again. So it's really about just starting with what is that strategy? And then two, take that strategy, turn it into a hiring plan, and based on the hiring plan, put things into action. I think hiring is a long game. There's some people that I talk to for 2 years before I hire them. So always keep your connections, always keep in touch with people. And so that when that hiring plan comes back to life, you can actually put it in action.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think kind of evolving from that, and this question is for Alexis, why don't you start us off? But we're wondering, what are some tips for introducing hiring technology to more. And I think that's probably a lot of people are being forced into that right now. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think kind of just making sure to stay aligned with the hiring teams and being transparent, and I think kind of nailing the point that we've kind of talked about before, how recruiting really does belong to everyone. It's everyone's responsibility, and kind of circling back to that. So I think definitely depending on the hiring technology, I think right now we're trying to figure out what additional technology or tools we will need when, going 100% remote, especially for some technical interviews. But I think just kind of, nailing down the importance is super important, and kind of just working closely with the team is probably what I would suggest.
Awesome. So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit to, I think, something that was mentioned. We got a few questions about this. What exactly is a sourcing party? Alexis, can you talk about the experiences at Greenhouse holding those? I know in particular, I've always been a remote worker, and I heard a lot about a dumpling sourcing party that I wish I had been to. So if any of you have experiences with that, but Alexis, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, for sure. So pretty much whenever we have a role that we're either kicking off or we kind of anticipate that it might be hard to fill, a recruiter and recruiting coordinator work together with the hiring manager to get together either a team or department, whatever makes most sense, usually the department, and throw I think we typically do an hour on everyone's calendars, super casual, but it's kind of we'll order in, we did dumplings one time. I think we've done cookies and cupcakes. We try and switch it up and encourage people to come and enjoy the snacks while also posting to their network about the specific job that we're highlighting, or submitting referrals, or kind of actually doing their own sourcing on their network. And that way it's kind of a casual, fun environment to do some sourcing and recruiting as an entire department or team. But yeah, I think, Ken, you might have mentioned something about sourcing parties, so I'm not sure what your experience is, but I'm sure you have stuff to add as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides of it. So first of all, beer, pizza, get people in a room with a bunch of laptops, right? You can make that work. I think what I'll focus on is I think the key is to make it not feel like a chore, because, sourcing is hard. It's a job you get paid for. And so convincing a bunch of engineers to stop coding and to do this, that is really powerful if you can make that happen. So I think the way you do that is you inspire people to own this,
submitting referrals, or kind of actually doing their own sourcing on their network. And that way it's kind of a casual, fun environment to do some sourcing and recruiting as an entire department or team. But yeah, I think, Ken, you might have mentioned something about sourcing parties, so I'm not sure what your experience is, but I'm sure you have stuff to add as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides of it. So first of all, beer, pizza, get people in a room with a bunch of laptops, right? You can make that work. I think what I'll focus on is I think the key is to make it not feel like a chore, because, sourcing is hard. It's a job you get paid for. And so convincing a bunch of engineers to stop coding and to do this, that is really powerful if you can make that happen. So I think the way you do that is you inspire people to own this problem, to own the recruiting problem, on top of being an engineer. But also let every time they find somebody, through their lens, they're able to better vet, is this the profile that we want? Is this somebody I want to work with? The quality is going to be drastically increased. And at the end of the day, they'll have been part of getting this person to join the company. And I think that's really special, right? So as a hiring manager, invest in getting people excited about being part of the process so that it's easy to create these parties and actually have fun.
That's great. Okay, Alexis, you mentioned hiring manager training. Can you tell us a little more what goes into that initial hiring manager training between recruiting and that new hiring manager?
Yeah, personally, it's not something that I've owned. I think two of the colleagues on my team own it, but it's pretty much, we have a deck that's built out that pretty much just kind of goes over the expectations of, what it means to be a hiring manager, what their involvement would be overall. And it is kind of high level because every role may be a little bit different, but it's really just outlining like key responsibilities, what the involvement looks like. We go through, I believe, like what a kickoff meeting is, how we run different roundups at the end. It's really kind of just an overview of the recruiting process for someone who has never been a hiring manager before. So once you've gone through hiring manager training once, if you're opening up another role in the future, you don't have to go through it again. It's really just like a high level overview. And then if they, you know, of course, during onboarding, everyone kind of gets a demo of Greenhouse, but in case there's anything else that hiring managers need to know about, like the software and what their involvement would be, they would go through that as well. But yeah, it's done through like one-on-one in a deck and just kind of high level.
Awesome. This question is for Yuri. How do you get the number of hires you're going to make a year? I've seen so many formulas to get this number. Was wondering how you get that data.
Yeah, so I think we touched up on this a little bit already, and it's basically just sort of like reverse engineering the recruiting funnel. I don't make the calculation of how many hires I expect to make in a given year. What I do when I sit down with a hiring manager is say, okay, is this a pipeline role, or are we looking for a one-time hire? Right? And then I basically look for roles in the past that I think are similar, that could provide some kind of clue how long it's going to take to hire for this role, right? So if, for example, we only need to get one hire, maybe I'll expect 5 offers for which I need 10 on-sites, for which I need 20 TPS, all the way up to maybe the conclusion is like, okay, we need to send out 1,500 reach outs in order to get one hire here. That's what we expect, right? So how many reach outs can I realistically do for this role in a week, right? Let's say it's 200, right? So if I would do 200 a week, that would make 7 weeks of reach outs, a little more, in order to get to the expected volume needed in order to make this hire. Getting the data, if it's a pipeline role and you've done it many times, it's very easy. If it's a unique role, it's a lot harder. The best way that I look at it is just pick a role that you think is similar and go off of that. Also, if you go to recruiter meetups, just talk to other recruiters that may have worked on a similar role, and maybe they'll be able to mention some numbers. And in the end of the day, it's also an iterative process. Just you're never going to get it, 100% right. Sometimes you just end up hiring someone in 3 weeks and it's great, and sometimes it can take a little longer. But generally, it gives a good approximation.
Awesome. Marketers love funnels too, so I love that answer. It looks like Can had a little bit of technical issues, but it looks like you're back. Our next question is actually for you. Wondering how you would maintain the candidate experience as we move more towards virtual interviews. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, excellent question. Well, first of all, even in a non-remote situation, like making a great candidate experience is hard, right? So let's acknowledge that first. And so making remote's even more challenging. So I think, there's two sides. So one, let's separate the logistics. There's a lot of things you can just do remote and it's fine, like signal collection and the coding and everything. The thing that you don't have anymore is you can't deliver the energy of the office to the candidate anymore. It's very different, so now people feel like they're in a silo. And so, from there, what can you do to convey that energy that people would normally feel when they walk into an office and start interviewing? And so I've heard different examples, but for example, there's always a lunch session, right? Get people on there, create some energy, create some structure so that people are, there's intros, there's like sharing of two truths and a lie, just like make it a game, right? At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to replicate that energy that you just organically get when you walk into an office. With Zoom, you just can't feel that, right? Bring that to them, bring that office to them.
Yeah, all great points. Along the same lines with candidates here, for Yuri and Alexis on the recruiting side, how do you get candidates to complete the candidate survey? We send it out and don't get many people completing it. Any tips there?
Honestly, we kind of just send it out and hope for the best. I think I'm not sure if there's a way to kind of get candidates to do it, but I know that it's something that we'll, sometimes mention like, oh, you should expect a candidate survey, especially if we do get feedback from candidates after an on-site. Like if they email us over feedback, whether it be positive or negative, we'll always kind of say thank you so much for that feedback. We'd love if you kind of put it in the survey as well. But yeah, we send it out at a certain point in our process and kind of hope for the best.
Yeah, we do the same thing. Although at my previous company in the Netherlands, what we used to do is whether, every candidate that we basically had a recruiter phone screen with from that stage on, if we were going to reject them, we would call them up and give them feedback, which is then gave us the opportunity to also ask them for feedback on the process that we put in place and what their experience was. But I also understand that that may not be scalable for, especially for startups. So yeah, my current company, we definitely just email it out and hope for the best as well.
Cool. We're still getting a lot of questions in here, so I think we'll keep going for a little bit. I can tell you we're not even going to brush the surface, so we'll try to make sure that we can kind of consolidate and summarize the most asked questions here, and both Gem and Greenhouse will come together to address those via blog posts or emails back. So just letting you know if we don't get to your question that we're trying to, and we'll make sure you get an answer. Here's one for everybody. When you need to hire 15 to 20 salespeople in a few months, what's the best way to do that outside of using external agencies? And so I think, again, like approaching it from that relationship between a hiring manager and recruiter here and that extreme volume. Can you speak to that scenario at all?
I could offer something.
Anyone want to kick us off? Great.
Yeah. So Yuri, you're familiar with this, but basically, speaking of going outside the process, right? Sander, when I was working with Yuri, had success with batch interviewing, which is basically, you pick a day, like a Saturday, and you create an all-day engagement, and you let candidates know that they'll be selecting into this batch experience. And you could have anywhere from 20 to maybe 50 candidates all in one day. And you specially craft that process for that experience. It's not going to be the same as what a normal candidate would see. And you also make sure that the right people are there, not only to, interview and kind of get the signal, but also to kind of create the fun experience. I think you can deliver a different kind of energy, part of the interview is also selling the candidate. You can deliver a different kind of energy and experience in that kind of environment. One thing, so one experience we had at Uber was we actually did recruiting for recruiters. We had a whole day event on a Saturday. We took up the entire auditorium, and we had not only interviews, but also group exercises, that they're interactive across the candidates. Then we took them out for happy hour. We did a batch debrief. It was pretty amazing. We got a 50% hire through that. And that's something that you can't really write a playbook for because they're not that frequent, but you can find success that way.
Yeah, definitely agree with Ken here that batch days are a great way to hire a lot of people in a short amount of time, especially with batch days. I think because you have all the interviewers in one place together as well, it just creates a really sort of cool energy that rubs off on the candidates as well. And often because you sort of do a batch debrief as well, you are able to very quickly follow up with offers, which in my experience yields very good results as well.
Very cool.
Yeah, I don't think we've had.
Go ahead, Axel.
Oh, yeah, no, I was going to say, I don't think Greenhouse has done any events like that, but I can kind of speak to when we had to hire a bunch of full stack engineers within a pretty short amount of time. What we did was actually look back on our old processes and kind of had a team retro with all the different hiring managers and everyone who was working on the recruiting team to kind of see what worked in the past, what hasn't worked, and built out a new process on that. And we also invested in a couple of helpful tools as well, like different interviewing tools and different tools that would kind of help us find more candidates. And from there, we were kind of able to reach our hiring goals. But it was definitely a mixture of team retro, working really closely, and then also just kind of seeing what tools would be most helpful in this situation.
Awesome. Yeah, great to hear the 3 different perspectives on kind of how to achieve that extreme hiring goal. Let's do maybe 3 more questions. Let's see here. With so many people working from home, are candidates being more responsive or less responsive during this time? Is a phone call a better way to reach candidates right now, or is LinkedIn, email, outreach preferred during this unprecedented time? Any thoughts on that? And we hear from our recruiters first, Yuri or Alexis. I know we also talked about things might be, slower for some companies than others. But for those candidates that are kind of in the pipeline currently, what's the best way to communicate?
I would say for me personally, our process has always been emailing for like sourcing or scheduling or follow-ups, and then phone calls for any type of scheduled conversation, whether it be an interview, feedback call, or any type of check-in. So kind of going back to that, I've kind of been sticking to our same structure, and even though we are working from home and things are a bit different, kind of just trying to keep at least the interview process the same. So sticking with email for what feels most necessary there, and then phone calls for anything that's scheduled. So I haven't really changed my process around that much with everyone working from home, but like we mentioned before, TBD what will change in the future based on what's going on.
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot to add to that. We haven't changed up our process either. We also mainly use email to reach out to candidates and for scheduling whatnot. So no real difference.
That's good if you got the structure in place that works. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
So I might offer something slightly different. I would encourage recruiters to, as quickly as possible, establish a dialogue over text, SMS. It's the one channel that people respond to very quickly. It feels very intimate. And, when you have an offer or something that's very urgent, like you will get a response, but you have to use it sparingly, right? So you can quickly lose trust if you abuse that channel. But, when I do the initial call, I like to just follow up, say, hey, thanks for doing that call with me, and get that text in place. So now they know that it's me. And now they know when they get another message that, we're going to have a real-time personal conversation. And this may be true whether or not we're in a remote world or not. Establish that trusted communication. Email can tend to get crowded.
I think it's a really good point, especially coming from a hiring manager and that candidate relationship there. Great. For Alexis or Yuri, we have a question. What reports or metrics do you find most valuable in Greenhouse that you share with your stakeholders, or on the data side?
Yeah, I've really liked our, I think it's called, I'm not sure if it's called candidate pass-through rate, but it is the report that shows you like what percentage of candidates are going through each stage. I find that really helpful for when we have like a technical remote coding, because looking at that can kind of allow us to see over time, even though our interview has stayed the same, are candidates dropping off here, are more people passing through, and from there kind of seeing what that looks like from the interview side, making sure that all of our interviewers are aligned on what passing looks like, what doesn't look like, and even just like leveling. And then also even for roles that don't have a technical piece in the beginning, I think like department phone screens, when a hiring manager is doing phone screens, or even the recruiter as well, just seeing like how many people are passing through. Does it look too low? Does it look too high? And just kind of aligning on what the pipeline looks like based off of that, I think can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, definitely like to echo what Alexis just said. Pass-through rates are definitely metrics that I love sharing with the hiring managers. Another one I mentioned earlier is the interviewer calibration report that basically allows you to see which interviewers are doing a better job than others when it comes to predicting whether the candidate is going to get hired or not. Another metric I'd like to share, not from Greenhouse but from GEM, is just the candidate response rate from the reach outs, right? And specifically the positive response rate. So how much percent of the people that you reach out to will actually hop on a call with you? I definitely think that's another important one to give an estimation as to time to hire and how the pipeline is going to look like.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead, Alexis.
No, yeah, it just actually kind of reminded me talking about the virtual remote coding interviews and kind of pulling the data there. Actually, I think you mentioned it too, Lauren, the ebook it's really helpful in terms of, virtual interviewing, even technical stuff as well. So that could be helpful, whether from like a data side or just in general with virtual interviewing at this point in time.
Awesome. Okay, why don't we do one more question here? Anybody that wants to weigh in. For employees that will eventually work in the office, how do you go about selling candidates on the actual office space when they cannot visit the office? I think getting that kind of cultural identity of your company across right now, interviewing when they might not be able to come on site. Alexis, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I think are actually in the process of trying to get pictures of our office and videos of our office to see what exists there and sending that over to our candidates. We do send over like a video from, I think once we schedule a phone screen, we do send over a video that gives an overview of Greenhouse. I think it shows some of the office, but trying to get updated pictures of our offices to share with candidates so they have an idea of what that looks like. And then, having everything virtually over Zoom. So you are kind of able to connect face-to-face with people there. I think it's something that we're still kind of trying to figure out. I know we definitely want to ask candidates for feedback on it as well. But I think that's kind of our starting point.
Awesome. Cool. Before I send everyone off here, were there any final thoughts to add to today's discussion? Okay, cool. Thank you again so much, and thanks for hanging on through all these questions. I think we got to maybe like 10% of them. So we'll definitely be following up with everybody with some more resources. So keep an eye on your inbox there. And one quick note too, if you're able to hang on for just 30 seconds after we end the webcast today, we have a really short 3-question survey. So you can let us, give us some feedback on this and let us know what other types of topics you'd like to see discussed in our Greenhouse webinar series. So thank you again. Thank you so much to all of our speakers, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, and we'll see you next time.